right, Pradeep, you got to be with me on stage right now. Innovation and scaling up, transforming traditional business in the current environment. You're going to be hosting this session. I'm going to leave it to you, and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, last night many of us were here when the show was being put up, and we were wondering how it's going to go. And it feels so good. The whole auditorium is full, and we still have more people, coming in. So, thank you all for coming here. You know, earlier in the morning, we talked about the whole entrepreneurial journey from a startup to scaling up to even exits, and we've tried to cover these topics with luminaries, people who have really done it, who've been very successful. So I would like to introduce you to Mr. Harsh Mariwala. We call him Harsh Bhai with love. Harsh Bhai has been really one of the industry leaders who have set examples for many of us in the industry. He is Harsh Bhai is chairman of Marico Limited and Kaya, chairman and managing director of Kaya Limited, which is a cosmetics company. Journey that Harsh Bhai has taken, is been amazing. He kind of we talk about innovation and disruption. He took it upon himself that it's just doing more of the same traditional commodities business that he inherited won't be enough. So he, launched these new businesses over the years in consumer markets and cosmetics, etc. And then dedicated a lot of his life into the cause of entrepreneurs. He founded Marico Foundation, which really focuses on innovation in the industry for India and encourages. He will talk about that as to how innovation is so important for businesses to not only survive but to transform themselves. And he also has started Ascent, which is about scaling up of the business. As Ty and many of us, encourage all of you to start new businesses and get started. The next stage comes for entrepreneurs. How do I scale up? How do I compete in a market which is highly competitive? And so Harsh Bhai has started Ascent. He will talk about that, which helps. So we are actually collaborating very closely with Ascent, Ty, and especially for Mumbai. So I welcome Harsh Bhai on stage. Thank you. We will have Harsh Bhai speak, and then we'll have a Q&A.
Thank you, Pradeep, for all the kind words, and good morning to all of you. Good morning. So very happy to see such a large audience, and I have to look at different directions to make the eye contact, but I'll try and do that. So let me begin by saying that I love entrepreneurs, because I think entrepreneurs add a lot of value to the society, and I think most of us underestimate what we can do. We have a big challenge in terms of creating a business. But once you create a business, I think you create jobs, you add a lot of wealth to the society, you create meanings for people who work for you. So looking at that, I decided that I have to support entrepreneurs in my personal capacity and not in the company capacity. And I was evaluating different options. How do I support entrepreneurs? And initially I started looking at new entrepreneurs. Can I mentor them? But I realized that when you have to mentor individual entrepreneurs, each entrepreneur will need a lot of hand-holding. And it'll be difficult for me to impact entrepreneurs in large numbers. And whatever I wanted to do, I was looking at a large number of entrepreneurs. So I toyed around with that, but gave it up, saying that let me look at entrepreneurs from a different angle. Because I have many friends, I've seen many entrepreneurs who have fantastic businesses, but they are just not able to scale up. They're not able to scale up because of some of the issues are at their own end. either they have issues with the other promoters or the family, and they are not able to come out of that web, or they may have issues in terms of their own leadership style. They're not willing to delegate, or they don't want to take risks. So I'm saying that there are many things which are within the entrepreneurs which actually prevent them in scaling up. And if I can help them scale up, then to that extent the entrepreneurs, I'll be able to do justice to this whole entrepreneurship movement. So considering that, we started Ascent, which is now in existence for last about 3 years. And we have a Bombay chapter where we help entrepreneurs scale up. We have created an ecosystem where entrepreneurs learn from each other. So individual mentoring doesn't happen, but we create an ecosystem where we create trust groups and entrepreneurs learn from each other. So if any of you is interested in joining Ascent, I think there are individuals. What is Ascent? AscentORG.net? AscentFoundation.in is the website. So having said that, let me talk about my own journey in building a business. I started at a very, very young age, at the age of 20. When I joined the family organization, at that time Bombay Oil Industries, a traditional, typically family managed organization where I was the first person from the next generation. My father, 3 of my uncles, they were all part of the same company. And in a typically family managed organization, virtually everything is done by everybody. And then there are no professionals. So there was nobody to guide me in terms of what to do. And at one level that was good because my father said that you explore whatever you wanted to do. And we had 3 different businesses. We had a spice extracts business, we had an edible oil business, we had a chemicals business. And in that exploration journey, I was looking at the edible oil business and realized that that's one business which is not doing well. We are mainly in bulk edible oils, unbranded. And if I can convert that business from unbranded to branded, then the business will become far more profitable, it will become sustainable. So with that in mind, I started my journey in branding. And in the initial phases, we spent a lot of energy in creating the right distribution network that took us up to a point. But I think businesses need disruptions, and you cannot just go on in the same way as you've done it all your times. And if I look back at my own history, various disruptions have happened in our own business journey. The first disruption happened when we created the consumer brands out of the edible oil, bulk edible oil business. And then we created distribution. But we went up to a point, and that time I realized that if this business has to grow, we have to innovate, So what do you innovate in a product like coconut oil, because after all, it can be copied by others. So initially we tried and improved the quality, others copied, but we said that can we actually do something more in that area? And at that time, the whole market for coconut oil was in tins. And we said that if we can offer the same product in plastics, it's cheaper, it's easier to use, it's more attractive to look at. So we virtually thought we had a winner on hands. And we will be able to convert the market very easily. But when we went to the trade, all of them said nothing doing. You are not going to pack coconut oil in plastics, because apparently before we were planning to come in, there was some other player who had launched coconut oil in plastics in a square-shaped bottle, not did a very good job in terms of packing, a lot of oil oozing out on the surface of the bottle, resulting in the fact that when the retailer closed the shop in the evening and opened the shop next morning, all the rats had bitten all the coconut oil bottles and their whole shop was spoiled. So there was huge trade resistance, but if you want to innovate and if you want to disrupt, you cannot give it up. So we said that we have to persist, we have to find out a way. And what we did was we went back to our drawing board. We briefed the packaging developer to design a bottle which was a round-shaped bottle which the rat would not be able to take a bite. We asked our packaging department to ensure that no oil was oozing out and the rat would not know that there is coconut oil inside. So with that in mind, we developed the bottles, and we actually kept those bottles in rat cages for a few days, just to ensure that the rats are not able to bite. And luckily, we were successful. And with those pictures, we went to the trade again, saying that this is what we have done, and please keep some. So initially there was a lot of resistance, but you keep a few bottles. And slowly and surely over a period of time, we were able to break the resistance. And today the whole market is 100% plastics. But it took us almost 10 years for us to convert the market from tin to plastics. And what I want to say is innovation needs, apart from ideation, it needs a lot of persistence and a lot of execution, because when it comes to executing that shift from tins to plastic, you have to go on tracking it. Every month I would go on tracking what is the plastic contribution, or invest money into the marketplace to ensure that people are buying plastic instead of tins. So I think that journey went off well, and that resulted in our market share jumping from a 15% to becoming a clear market leader. So at one level, plastic looks very simple, but when it comes to executing, I think there are a lot of things which go into making that. Now come winter, the coconut oil freezes, so everybody again would go back to tins. So we had a challenge: how do we develop a winter thing where people can scoop out the coconut oil? So we had a winter jar with a spout, and I think that prevented the shift from plastics to tins in winter. We also have a 1 rupee mini bottle. I don't know how many of you have seen it. It's a mini bottle which is our answer to sachets, and we didn't have a good market share in sachets, so we developed that bottle, and again I think we were able to increase market share. Now, as a brand becomes popular, or any businesses become popular, we've seen that there are a lot of copycats. People want to copy you. And at one survey which was done, Parachute was the most copied brand in the whole country. We had something like 100 copycats, and we can take some action in terms of complaining to the police, raiding them, but can we take a fundamental action in terms of packaging? So we actually briefed a mold maker in Europe saying that, can you develop a bottle which is a combination of a pilfer-proof and a flip top? And they developed the mold, which costed at those days, many years back, about 2 crores. So we said that with that in mind, we will ensure that the copycats will not flourish. So all of a sudden, again, through that innovation, we ensured that there was a substantial reduction in copycats. Though I must say it was a matter of time, and the Indian mold makers were able to make that mold at 1/10 the cost. But that's India, So what I want to say is, you have to go on continuously innovating in any segment. You just can't say, I have innovated once and I have stopped. From then on, the Parachute brand has gone into many other innovations, newer extensions. So I think innovation has played a very, very important role in the journey. And for innovation to happen, you need to have the right culture and the right people, So we believe that we need to have right people who are willing to take risks, because there will be failures in innovations, and people are scared of failing, they will stop taking risks. If the organization takes some steps which punishes failures, then you had it. People will just stop taking any risks. So it's very important to create a culture where you have youth wanting to take risks. It's okay to fail. The organization does not punish failures. It reinforces innovations on a perpetual basis. It creates dialogues where people can talk to each other. Because innovation doesn't happen in one mind. You need one idea, you need to discuss with somebody else, something else develops. Just like a business, and you start a new business, you have some business model in mind. But by the time actually you finalize the business approach, and when you actually have a business model which works, it's substantially different than what you thought of. And I think all that comes out of a lot of experience. So you have to have a very open mind in terms of ensuring that when you are shifting your business from one to another, you have to have an open mind. You have to go on experimenting. It's okay to fail, because it's like a child walking. While the child is learning to walk, he'll fall down. It's okay to fail, And I think many of us feel that failure is not good. It's a wrong thing to do. But as entrepreneurs, I think we have to ensure that not only we look at failure from a different lens, but I think everybody within the organization should look at it from that lens. And I'm not talking of some foolish failures. Foolish failures, of course, should be avoidable, but failures with an intent to succeed, which is planned in the right manner, is okay to fail, I'm saying. Because out of failures, you will get learnings. We've had, in the recent past, we had launched under the brand name Saffola, we had launched Saffola snacks, which were innovation because they were not fried. I'm talking about 5-7 years back. But we went health forward in that. We said that health has to be more important than taste. Now in the snacks category, people are just wanting taste first and health second. And we didn't understand that part of consumers' mindset. So we failed. The product had to be withdrawn. But out of that failure, we had that insight that in food especially, taste is most important. There will be regional variations in taste. And we launched our range of savory oats about 2 years back. With that in mind, very good tasting, good for health, but taste came first and health came second. And that product has been a runaway success. We have actually taken over We have something like 70% market share in that savory oats segment. And we've overtaken players like Kellogg's, Quaker. So I think that failure really helped us in terms of launching the brand, and we've done well through that failure. So if I had to look back at my own journey, I think I would say that three or four things which have played a very important role. I think every organization has to find a right to win. So what is the unique thing you are bringing into the marketplace compared to your competition, which will enable you to win? It could be anything. You may be pioneering a segment, as we did in Kaya. You could be leveraging an innovation, as we did it in, say, Revive Starches. You could be the first mover. You may enter a segment where the competition is weak. So I think you need to identify what will make you win in the marketplace, and then go on backing that proposition in the marketplace. And today, in most categories, we are market leaders. And I think the clear reason why we are there is because of the portfolio choice. You need to have the right portfolio choice. What is that portfolio which you want to get into, which will enable you to win? The second thing which comes to my mind is talent and culture. Talent plays a very, very important role. And if I look back at my own journey, we have had various levels of teams which have worked with us. In the initial phase, when we were small, we had a certain set of people. They did well at that time. But at some stage when we grew, we realized that they were just not able to cope up with the challenge. And I think many of us feel that loyalty is important, that we have to go on rewarding individuals who have worked for us in the past. But my viewpoint is that, if at some stage you realize that they are not able to meet today's challenges, I think it's better that you ask them to go. Because if you have a weak links within the organization, at the top level especially, it will just demotivate others who are strong in performance. So I've had various teams changes over a period of time. On an average, a team lasts for 10, 15 years, but when the scale changes, and I'm not saying that you leave them on the road, that person. You treat that person in a fair manner, give them options in terms of finding certain other jobs. And actually that person looking back would be far more happier in a surrounding where that person can add value to some other organization. So I think that's my view, that you need to create disruptions, not only on your products front, but on people front also. And when it comes to taking talent, I think the difference between good and excellent performer is 7 times, An excellent performer normally creates 7 times more value than a good performer. So for critical functions, one has to determine what are the critical functions within your organization where you are creating value. In our case, it is brand building, it's distribution. We need to select the best talent, because if we get excellent performance in our brand building, then our value addition from them will be much more. And we may have a different policy in terms of paying them or treating them well. But I think clearly the whole objective is to create value and create disruption. And there will be individuals within the organization who will say that how come somebody else is getting much more salary. But you can't be a very socialistic way of running organization. Even when it comes to increments or promotion, you have to go by merit and meritocracy, and not just keeping everybody on par. So the third thing I wanted to mention was about growth. I think organizations have to have growth, because growth is like oxygen, Growth excites all stakeholders, whether it is shareholders, whether it's employees, because the organization grows, you get bigger opportunities to work on, you get newer challenges. It's good for everybody, all the associates. It's good for the society also, because if you're growing and if you're profitable. But growth has to be profitable over a period of time, and it has to be sustainable. So at some stage over a period of time, I'm not saying immediately, but 3, 5, 7 years after you start a business, you should see the visibility that I will become profitable at some stage. And you pursue that profits, and then so it has to be profitable, it has to be sustainable. And the biggest challenge in growth is how do you create that growth mindset within the organization? I think it starts from the top, but the biggest challenge is how do you filter that growth mindset all the way down to the bottom, to your sales rep, to your distributor sales rep, so that that person is thinking of growth every day, day in and day out. I think the top management can play a very important role in having this mindset and creating the right policies. For example, when it comes to launching new products, we said that, okay, you go on investing for 3 years, 5 years, you don't make money, it's okay. When it comes to pricing also, I think pricing growth precedes profitability. So when it comes to new country entry, also organic entry, we again invest from a long-term point of view. So if you give the right signals to the organization that growth is more important, I think then the whole organization will be looking at growth. I think the next step I want to talk about, next thing which is a big learning, which is applicable to all businesses, is governance. I think it's applicable not only to big businesses, but the smallest of businesses. And when I'm talking of governance, I'm talking of a larger subject of governance in terms of being on the right side of the law, in terms of ensuring that you're very, very fair within the organization, in ensuring that the organization's interest comes first and then the promoter's interest comes, or that key employee's interest comes. So when I was talking earlier that when some employee was a star performer at some stage, is not that relevant over a period of time. I mean, no point extending him within the organization because the organization's interest comes first and then the employee's interest comes. And same thing for promoters. Many times we have as promoters, we wear many hats. You are managing the business, you are a promoter, and you are also you're responsible if you're a public company to the outside shareholders. So when it comes to taking decisions which are in conflict, I think the key thing is the organization interest should always come first. And after that, the key stakeholders' interest. And we've seen that in many businesses and internationally where some key manager has got some ESOPs or some promoter has done something to favor him. I think that has really made them fall in the marketplace. And I think it's very important because you have to create attract the right talent. Your valuation in the marketplace also will be better. You'll get the right associates. So I think one should not underestimate the importance of governance, irrespective of the size. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was purpose. I think organizations have a purpose. We have to add value to all the stakeholders and not just shareholders. So whether it's your own employees or associates, key associates you're working on, or your own consumers or the society, because all of them are interlinked. You are just not in isolation. And if you give something to your key employees or all your members of the organization, they'll feel far more motivated. All the other stakeholders also will benefit. So I'm saying that all of the key stakeholders are interrelated and they are not operating in isolation. So can you walk that extra mile in ensuring that your key associates, whether in our case advertising agency or our key packers or our vendors, key vendors, can you create more value to them? We call them to our training programs. We actually go that extra mile in improving their productivity. And we treat them like our own members. We have a yearly appraisal to them. We have an incentive policy depending on how they've done. And I think what I wanted to say was that you have to look at all the stakeholders in the business and not just shareholders. So I think these are some of my learnings in my journey. And I think let me end by saying that an entrepreneur is a person who wants to leave a footprint in the society. He wants to transform lives. He wants to create meaning such that even people who do not know him will shed a tear when he's gone. He's so focused on the meaning that nothing phases him. Not the mundane rigor of getting the idea of the drawing board into the marketplace. The only thing that drives him is the goal, and the goal lays the road he makes. An entrepreneur is someone who invented the phrase, "I can." Thank you.
Thank you, Harshbhai. I think it's something, it's great lessons, that you've kind of distilled for this audience for your decades of, being in the business and being very successful, going through different times. Some of the key lessons that I take away from here is that you talked about that a good performer is 7 times more productive than an average one. So you look for the right performer anytime you're choosing your people and the team. The other point which is really interesting is that this whole conference is about disrupt or be disrupted. And typically when you think about innovation or disruption, you think about technology, and technology is a great enabler today. However, what you brought out is that it's not only about technology, it's your thinking. It's really, what innovation, in a business model, in the way you approach your customers, your people, etc. So that was a really excellent point. You talked about the organization interest should be ahead of just shareholders. And really, you hit the nail on its head by talking about the definition of stakeholder goes beyond just the investors. It's really your employees, your leaders, your vendors, and you talked about adding value to everybody around you in that whole ecosystem. So I think that's a lesson for all of us. You talked about the governance being very important in the long run to survive and be credible. And the last point I thought, which we should really take away from here, is the growth being the oxygen for any business. Like if you don't grow, you're going to, eventually kind of be irrelevant. So thank you for that talk. I will now open up. We have good time so for questions. Do we have any microphones here?
Good morning, sir. Before I ask you a question, I want to acknowledge TIE and assign that I'm coming from a very small town from Gujarat, and I'm a member of TIE since last 6 years, and participates all TIE programs, getting knowledge from all speakers and leaders, and really see the growth in my life, actually, a shift in my life. So my question is that this session is about the innovation and scaling up. So every entrepreneur is a startup or is a scaling up or is a corporate established player. They require, to scaling up, they require team. And there is a challenge in India to have a quality teams which has a commitment. There is a quality disciplines. So in India, majority, do the study for getting a degree for the getting job. So I want to know how corporate leaders can get more involvement into the, these education sectors. They will start their own from entry level 0 to exit level, their own institute, their boards or universities, so they can create a curriculum which is required industry standard and give a guarantee of job like the corporate lobby that.
I'm not able to understand the question. What is the...
Well, let me try to rephrase. I think basically our education system may be limited in how corporates can help involve so that that people are employable, in various aspects that they're trained for.
So I think first of all there is a war for talent. So if you are well qualified and if you are capable, then I think if I'm on the other side, it's very difficult for us also to get the right talent. And I think to that extent every organization has to create a value proposition. What is your value proposition which will help you attract talent? But that's not answering your question. I think your question is how do entrepreneurs help create, I think I don't know much about the subject, but there have been some big houses which have created management schools, and at one level when we recruit somebody, we put them through a training program which lasts for 9 months to 1 year, and that enables them to, but these are all management graduates from A School of Management. So I think there are enough options available for a person to actually to get enrolled into a good school of management if that person has the capability to get it. And I don't see that as, always there will be more need for education, but there is already one ecosystem where there is a lot of education happening, whether by private or by some other charitable houses or charitable trusts. And I think that's my answer.
Yeah, and I think organizations like TIE, would play a role. Right? We've done about over 50 programs every year, 50 to 60 programs. This is just TIE Mumbai. If you look at TIE, all the chapters we're doing, and those are meant for practical kind of training. HR, marketing, etc. People with experience are giving back. So I think a lot depends on an individual, how hungry he or she is to learn. And I think if that is there, I'm sure the system will support it.
Thank you, Mr. Udas. But just want to let you know we've got 1 minute in hand.
Only 1 minute?
Yeah,
oh,
right.
Okay, okay. So,
Mr. Mariwala,
Yeah.
my name is Krishna Kumar. I'm from Siemens. It was nice to hear your talk. One question, how in your business you have a lot of competition with multinationals. Did you use any specific Indian cultural traits and tendencies to beat them?
So I don't know whether I can finish that within 1 minute, but I may take maybe a little more than 2-3 minutes now. So I think, first of all, I talked about the right to win in the portfolio choice. So we have actually ensured that most cases where we are there, we are not fighting competition from MNCs. And that's our right to win, because if I enter a shampoo category, and you have L'Oreal, Levers, Procter & Gamble, each one having 4 brands, global R&D, I can get a certain niche market share within the shampoo category, but I really cannot compete. So we avoid categories like that. But we have a niche, very small niche shampoo in what is under the brand name of Medicare, which is anti-lice shampoo. It's so small the others will not enter. And we are market leaders there, So I think portfolio choice ensures that we don't fight so much from the MNCs. But we've had some battles with some other MNCs. In 98, when Levers acquired Tomco, they inherited a brand in coconut oil. And they went aggressive against Parachute coconut oil. And we took them on. We increased our ad budgets, distribution. They took about 10-12% market share, but not from us. They took the market share from other weaker players. And what we leveraged, and I wish I had brought was the Indianness of the Parachute brand. I mean, we actually leveraged the fact that coconut is an auspicious fruit, and you actually showed auspiciousness of coconut oil and Parachute and all that, and we leveraged that, and we didn't lose any market share. They, over a period of time, lost interest in that category, and ultimately we bought that brand from them, So, but we fight competition. You have to be innovative. Like in case of oats, I told you, we entered in plain oats, but there we were not able to get market share beyond 15-20%. So we said, what do we need to do to disrupt the market? So we said that if Maggi has been able to develop all the masala noodles and all, can't we do a Maggi or a similar thing to the oats category? And that's what we've done. We got 3 flavors, and there we are clear market leaders with a 70% market share. So innovation is very important, and the right to win. So you have to have a right to win even if you fight the bigger multinationals. If you have the right to win, then I think you'll be able to overcome that competition.
I know we're running out of time. I just have one more question.
Not taking more than 10 seconds. My name is Adarsh Gupta. I want to understand from Mr. Harish Mariwala, what leads to innovation? And I want to understand, is it a state of mind? Is it a passion? Is it a habit? Is it a behavior? Is it a knowledge? Is it experience? Is it a process? Or it is something which is in your DNA?
Okay,
or it is an idea?
This can take a long time to answer. But
just
I think I talked about the culture of innovation. You need to create the culture of innovation. You people actually encourage people to take it. You have to have the right talent. You have to, as a top management, you have to reinforce innovation from different angles. You have to go on talking about when there's a brand plan presented to me, first thing out, everybody would know that what is the innovation thing you're doing. We have innovation awards every year at our organizational events. So we are reinforcing innovation on a perpetual basis from a different angles. We have innovation facilitator within the organization. So ultimately that leads to a culture of innovation, and that's how innovation thrives, So in a very short, I can't do full justice to your question.
I think you can talk offline.
One question, Mr. Mariwal, fantastic. I loved it.
Very
when you
short,
said focus has got to be on everybody and not just the stakeholder, the promoters. Do you see there is any difference between an organization's way of focusing on everybody versus a company which has got private equity funding or an angel investment funding? What is the difference between the focus discussions that we're talking about?
See, I've not experienced, say, private equity funding or angel funding, but I think if you're able to convince them that all stakeholders are important and not just private equity, and if they're reasonable, and I think that a lot will depend on the choice of the private equity investor you have. And there are studies, there is a book which is written on this subject where they have actually proven, this is a book written by Raj Sisodia and Jagdish Sheth. The name of the book is Firms of Endearment. And they have actually proven that those firms which are actually looking at all the stakeholders have beaten the Standard & Poor Index compared to any other frameworks. They compared with good to great companies and many others. And these companies have really done well financially also. So there is enough result. The whole movement has taken off very well in the Western world. It's under the name of conscious capitalism. There's a Conscious Capitalism Institute. So I think if you gather all the data and if you have the right partner, I think you should be able to convince the equity investor to follow that.
Thank you. And one question I have from a lot of the men and women in this here is that you started the Skya Limited, the beauty product company. So do you use it yourself? Because you look very young. So.
Of course, I am a scapegoat. Anytime something new comes in, I'm there.
Thank you.
I have a feeling you're going to do that right after this, Mr. Udas, right?
Yes.
Give it up for Mr. Udas's leniency for allowing so many questions. And Mr. Mariwala, thank you so much. And I must say, you have a great voice as well, sir. What baritone. All right, we have a small memento, which Mr. Udas is going to give you as well. Louder for the legend, please. Thank you so much, sir. And Mr. Udas, any more beauty tips you want from sir?
I'll talk to him off.
Backstage. Mr. Udas once told me, sir, he says, there is one perfect child in this world and every mother has it. I told him there's one perfectly hot wife in this world and every neighbor has it. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.